So I'm glad to see all of you guys here tonight. We're going to be talking about dinosaurs, one of my favorite subjects. Before we get to that, why did the Tyrannosaurus Rex cross the road? Answer, because chickens hadn't evolved yet. I know that's pretty lame, but the reason I bring that is that some articles have appeared in popular publications recently that claim that T-Rexes evolved into chickens. Well, think about that the next time you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't know where they come up with some of these wacky ideas. Most paleontologists don't believe that. They believe different scenarios. But anyway, the interest in dinosaurs continues on today just as much as ever, especially with the release of Jurassic Park, the movies in 1993. They keep showing those. But the interest in dinosaurs actually goes back quite a ways. From at least 1821 in England, there was a Dr. Gideon Mantell and his wife Mary Ann who liked to collect fossils in southern England along the seashore. And one day while Dr. Mantell was visiting a patient, his wife was out by the ocean collecting some fossils, and she found a giant tooth. Later, her husband went back to the same place and found some bones of some unknown extinct creature. Well, they didn't know what it was, but later on they spoke with someone who was familiar with iguanas in South America and Mexico, and he said, "Hey, this looks like an iguana tooth, only a huge one." So they called the creature Iguanodon. Well, not too many years later, in 1828, Mary Anning, also along the southern English coastline, used to collect fossils to sell in her father's souvenir shop. One day she found the first British pterosaur, that is, flying reptile. Today we know this as a Dimorphodon. Well, by 1841, enough of these fossil bones had been collected that Richard Owen gave them a name. He called them dinosaurs, meaning terrible lizards. Well, oops, just a second here. Okay, that's not coming up the way I want to. Just a moment. Okay, technical difficulty. I'm going to have to use my other notes. It's not coming up in presenter view for some reason. Okay, well, anyway, the biggest question for Christians is, how do dinosaurs fit in with the biblical timeline, specifically Genesis? How do we reconcile the millions of years claimed for dinosaurs with the Bible? And we might also ask, what killed them off? What happened to the dinosaurs? What about dragons? What about the stories that we hear about dragons? Any relation to dinosaurs? And the question that comes up from Jurassic Park, do you think it might be possible to clone dinosaurs? Okay, so with that then, what do we know about these creatures? Well, depending on what source you look into, there are over 600, 800, or 1,000 species of dinosaurs that have been discovered. I suspect the actual number is something below 500 because there's a lot of overlap. whenever they discover a new dinosaur and it doesn't look like something they've found before, they give it a new name. But a lot of times it might be, say, a younger of a species that have been discovered before, or maybe the opposite sex or something like that. But anyway, dinosaur taxonomy is very confusing, and there are more species than you can possibly imagine. So interesting sidelight to this too is the bone wars. In the western United States, starting about 1870, there were these two guys who were vying for recognition, trying to find the most fossil bones and trying to outdo each other. Their names were Edward Cope and Othniel Marsh. And these two guys would do anything to get the notoriety in the fossil world, including using every underhanded method they could think of, including stealing from each other. Well, this went on for about 25 years, and eventually they both started off fairly wealthy, but by the end of their lives they died broke, having spent all their money on fossil expeditions. Well, anyhow, they contributed 32 new dinosaur species to our knowledge. And according to some books, the dinosaur mania continues in a new golden age of dinosaur fossil discoveries that we're in today. Today, a lot of discoveries are coming out of China. So let's see, what do we know about these dinosaurs? Okay, this is not working. Okay, I'll do it that way then. All right, everybody wants to know about the biggest and baddest of all the dinosaurs. The biggest one discovered to date was a sauropod named Argentinosaurus, discovered in 1993 in Argentina. This guy was big, 90 feet long, and he came in a weight of 110 tons. Imagine 110 tons, 220,000 pounds. He would have taken up more than 5 semi-truck trailers in weight. On the other end of the scale, we have a little guy named Lagosuchus. Lagosuchus was just 12 to 16 inches long, and paleontologists think that he fed on animals, little animals, and insects. In between, of course, most of the dinosaurs fall into the category in between. The most famous is Tyrannosaurus rex. So what about T-Rex? Well, Tyrannosaurus rex means king of the tyrant lizards. He was up to 49 feet long, weighing in at 7 to 8 tons, and had fangs 6 inches long. The debate still goes on. Was it a true predator or just a scavenger? I think today most people feel that he was a true predator. Only 10 fossil remains of Tyrannosaurus rex have been found, most of those in the western United States, which I've shown on the map here, although a few have been found in Mongolia. Now, none of these fossils that they've found have been complete. Most of them are what they call disarticulated. That is, the bones are not together in their natural positions, but they show that they've been disturbed. Going on, here is one that has just come out as taking T-Rex's place as the largest carnivore, that is the largest meat eater. National Geographic in this month's edition say that Spinosaurus was a little bit larger than T-Rex, coming in at about 50 feet long. Now, Spinosaurus has this interesting sail on the back. It's not what they call a dermal frill, which means that the plates or spines were attached to the skin, but these bones actually stuck up. They were attached to the vertebrae. Nobody knows what they were for. Nobody has found a dinosaur alive to ask, so it's still a puzzle. Apparently this guy lived in the water much of the time. Then there's Parasaurolophus, one of the duck-billed dinosaurs. He came in at up to 33 feet long, weighing more than 3 tons. And then there's the Chasmosaurus, like the more familiar Triceratops, but he had a larger neck frill, up to about 17 feet long, in total length of 17 feet. And he weighed about 2 tons. Here's a guy that I wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley at night, Acrocanthosaurus. He had spikes all along his neck, his back, and his tail. He was up to 40 feet long and came in at 7,000 pounds. Now, flying reptiles technically are not dinosaurs, but we usually lump them in together because we think that they were all reptiles. So this is one of the pterosaur order. And so this is the pterodactyl. It was rather small compared to some of them, wingspan up to about 2.5 feet. And it had claws on his wings like bats and teeth in its bill. And we can't forget the marine monsters. Plesiosaur was one of them. If we reconstruct the plesiosaur, he looks something like this, at least they think. Now, of course, we do not know what the colors of these dinosaurs or marine reptiles were. So that's a pure guess. In fact, there's a lot of speculation that goes into putting these things back together, because when they find the fossil bones, we need to remember that that's only 10% of the original animal. So there's a lot of speculation that goes into putting these things together, and opinions as to what they looked like change from time to time. So most of what we find is incomplete. Most of the fossils are incomplete, and all we know about dinosaurs comes from these fossil remains. So this is a typical example of what we might find, what a paleontologist might find out in the field. A fossil skeleton before it's been chiseled away, before the rock's been chiseled away, and then it takes a long time to extract one of these guys, and this is what it might look like, in this case, a Stegosaurus, after the rock matrix has been chiseled away. Notice that the bones are still flattened, which is true in most cases, showing that something buried them with a lot of force. After the fossil is reconstructed, it might look like this, like the Stegosaurus. And then from that, they can determine, or at least make a guess, as to what the animal may have looked like in real life. Again, with the Stegosaurus and most of these others, we don't know what the plates were for on their back. There have been a lot of theories, but nobody really knows. So the question is then, what happened to the dinosaurs? Well, there have been more than 60 theories advanced as to what may have happened to them, the most popular being the mass extinction by an asteroid or meteor strike, or a volcanic eruption. In either case, dust and ash and debris would have been kicked up into the atmosphere, would have caused the climate to cool for a period of several years perhaps, and this would have choked off the plant life and therefore deprived the dinosaurs of their food. Well, so the theory goes anyway. The problem that I have with most of these theories is, well, what about the other animals? Why didn't it kill them off also? I think there's a better explanation, which, oh, well, maybe this is it. According to Gary Larson, anyway. But seriously, I think this provides us with a better explanation. A worldwide catastrophe that buried fossils, buried wildlife in the ocean and on land all over the world in sedimentary rock. We'll be back to that again later. But my question is, another question, how do they arrive at a date of 65 million years ago for the extinction of the dinosaurs? Well, it's derived from what they call the standard geologic column. According to evolutionary theory, dinosaurs prevailed for some 180 million years during the so-called Age of Reptiles. They flourished from, about 245 million years ago to about 65 million years ago, and then disappeared. And so, according to evolutionary theory, it all happened all of a sudden 65 million years ago. Well, let me put it this way. I don't have time to go into all the dating methods that they use, but all their dating is based on one underlying assumption, and that is uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism is the assumption that all geological processes have occurred in the past at the same rates as they do today. Now, this theory, in fact, it's actually really just an assumption. It's an unprovable assumption because, of course, none of us were there, but it was first advanced by, well, it was promoted mainly by Charles Lyell in about 1830 to 1833, and this is one of the primary things that influenced Darwin. But Lyell came up with the slogan that the present is the key to the past. That is to say that today things are happening the way they have always happened, or I should say, things have always happened at the same rates as they do today. Long, gradual processes over eons of time. Continental drift, building up of sediments, eroding of mountains, all very long processes, and this has always occurred. But my question is, what if something disrupted those processes? What if there was a global catastrophe that threw all the dates out of whack? And that's what we believe the Genesis flood does, accounts for that, accounts for it a lot better. What I'd like to do is give you some evidences that dinosaurs may have lived much more recently than 65 million years ago. Let's take a look, for instance, at some ancient literature. I start with the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote the history of Herodotus in 440 BC. In it, he describes a trip that he made to Arabia in which he saw these winged serpents, or mostly actually what he saw was this gorge that was piled high with bones from these winged serpents. And the people there told him, yeah, those bones are a result of being killed off by these winged serpents' enemies, the ibis, a bird called the ibis. These so-called serpents were reported to have wings like a bat, made of membranes. Now, they refer to serpents differently in the old days than what we think of today. Today we think of serpents as snakes, but in past ages that had a broader meaning. It referred to winged reptiles and sometimes land-dwelling reptiles. So let's look at another one. This guy by the name of Apollonius of Tyana was a Greek philosopher from the town of Tyana in Asia Minor in the 1st century A.D. He lived in the province of Cappadocia, which was a Roman province, and he reported on dragons of enormous size inhabited the swamps and mountains of India. They were up to 30 cubits, that is about 45 feet long. They were various colors. They all had scales, and many of them had crests on their heads. Some had what he called serrated backs, and he mentioned that they gave off a terrible hiss and lived in water, at least part of the time. He also described the Indian people as hunting these creatures and the fact that sometimes the dragon would win. Now, skeptics have dismissed all this stuff as pure fiction, but the thing of it is that these stories parallel similar stories of dragon-like creatures from many other cultures. I'm going to talk about a few more of these. For instance, in the British Chronicles, there are many ancient records of encounters with reptilian monsters in Wales, Scotland, and England in over 200 different locations. Many of these are described in medieval books, and here's one that goes into quite a bit of detail, and I'm going to read it verbatim. This comes from a Suffolk County Chronicle of 1405. It says, close to the town of Burris, near Sudbury, there's lately appeared to the great herd of the countryside a dragon, vast in body, with a crested head, teeth like a saw, and a tail extending to an enormous length. Having slaughtered the shepherd of a flock, it devoured many sheep. And it goes on to say, after an unsuccessful attempt by local archers to kill the beast, due to its impenetrable hide, in order to destroy him, all the country people around were summoned. But when the dragon saw that he was again to be assailed with arrows, he fled into a marsh or mere, and there hid himself among the long reeds, and was never more seen. Well, also in England, in 1449, there comes a story from a chronicle that's still in the library of the Canterbury Cathedral, dating from September of 1449. It describes two giant reptiles, seen fighting along a riverbank in the English countryside. One was described as being black, the other reddish and spotted. It says that the battle lasted an hour, after which one of the creatures yielded and went back to its lair. The scene thereafter became known as Sharp Fight Meadow. Well, books from the 16th century list a number of different animals resembling dinosaurs as still being alive. For instance, this one called Historia Animalium by Swiss naturalist Conrad Gessner. He had a chapter in there called On Dragons, which included this illustration. Somewhat fanciful perhaps, but it reminds me of if it's going to come up, let's try. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. It reminds me of a Scaphognathus, a flying reptile. But anyway, this is the type of thing that we see in a number of books. Going ahead to 1572 in Italy, there's a story that describes an encounter with a strange little reptile. Italian naturalist Ulysses Aldervanus reported an encounter between an Italian herdsman and some kind of a little dragon. It seems that this herdsman was following his ox cart on a country road near what's now Bologna, Italy. All of a sudden, the cart stopped. The oxen wouldn't move, so he went around the front to see what was going on. And here he said there was a strange little dragon giving off a terrible hiss. Well, he killed it with his rod and reported it to the Italian naturalist, who said it was definitely a baby reptile of some sort. Well, a number of other encounters have been recorded, again in Sussex, England in 1614. There was reported a 9-foot-long creature with scales, red on the underside, blackish on the back, and a white ring around its neck. It says the serpent or dragon could run as fast as a man and was thought to feed on rabbits. In 1691 in Rome, there's a description of what sounds like a flying dragon, a winged serpent, matching the Scaphognathus. It was reported to live in a cave in the wetlands outside of Rome. It had a crest on its head, wings of membranes, and 5 toes on each foot. In fact, as late as the early 1900s, we have reports of so-called winged serpents in the country of Wales. It seems that there's this man who died about 25 years ago who reported seeing them as a boy. And he said that they looked quite beautiful, that it looked like they were covered with jewels that were luminescent in the sunlight. And he said this wasn't just some old story invented to scare kids around the campfire, but it was a true tale. Well, why aren't they around today? Well, he said the reason that they were extinct is because these reptiles preyed on the livestock of the local farmers, and so they killed them off. Well, I'm sure most of us are aware that dragons are a prominent feature in Chinese culture. This tapestry is known as the celestial dragon, for instance. And most of the association with dragons that we know of comes from Chinese art. There are very few actual encounters with dragons recorded. Most of them are so tangled up in legends and myths, it's hard to separate fact from fiction. But it's interesting that, for instance, I visited this dinosaur exhibit in Reno one time, and they freely acknowledged in the exhibit the resemblance between Chinese dragons and dinosaurs. So did the Chinese actually see dinosaurs? Well, there are some sketchy reports that they may have, but interestingly enough, a lot of dinosaur fossils are coming out of China today. They've known about these fossils for a long time. The people used to grind them up and drink them and with some kind of liquid, thinking that they had healing powers. Well, this Mamenchosaurus was part of a dinosaur exhibit from China that was in Portland a few years ago. It was supposed to have the longest neck of any terrestrial animal, 59 feet long just for the neck. The total length of this critter was 115 feet. It was supposed to have died out, or lived, I guess I should say, 150 million years ago in the Jurassic period. Well, descriptions like this, these kind of tales have come to us from cultures worldwide. In this map, I show 20 different locations. And the stories that come out of these cultures aren't intended to be fictional, but something that they purportedly actually saw. Well, let's consider some other evidences that dinosaurs may have been around much more recently than evolutionists tell us. I'd like to consider dinosaurs in rock art. Now, there are two types of rock art that we can consider. One's the pictograph, and that is where there's an image painted on rock, and the petroglyph, where the image is carved on rock. Now, I only have time to do a couple examples tonight, but this one here is from Natural Bridges National Monument, and I believe it's at Kachina Bridge, if I remember right. Now, can you see anything up there? No, it's pretty faint, so I'm going to put an outline up there. A couple of years ago, my wife and I were down there, and while we were there, I remembered, oh yeah, there's supposed to be some kind of a dinosaur petroglyph around here someplace, or I guess in this case it's actually a pictograph because it's pretty faint. Anyway, so I went and I asked the ranger at the ranger station if he knew anything about it, and he said, oh yeah, I know where that is, and he showed me some pictures of it and told me exactly how to find it. And he said he didn't think it was a dinosaur because the tail was too heavy. So I asked him, oh, what do you think it is? Well, he didn't know. So we went down there and looked for it. It took about 15 minutes to find it because it was so faint on the rock. But anyway, there it is. It looks to me like some kind of dinosaur, some kind of a sauropod. It's attributed to the Anasazi people who lived in the area from 400 to 1300 AD. Now here's one that I came across just recently. It comes from the Wupatki National Monument in Arizona. It's unknown who made this or how old it is. This picture was taken at a place called Crack in the Rock. To get to it, you have to do an overnight hike on a guided tour with a ranger, and I don't know if anybody has studied it in any detail, but it looks like a fire-breathing dragon. Anyway, maybe a Spinosaurus, I'm not sure. Speaking of Spinosaurus, I've got a Spinosaurus tooth up here. After the presentation, if anybody wants to come up and take a look at it, you're welcome to do so. Here's another one which I just recently came across also in Agawa Rock, Lake Superior Provincial Park in the province of Ontario. This is a pictograph of Mishi Peshu, the so-called Great Lynx of the Ojibwa peoples. This was apparently painted by the Anishinaabe tribe, estimated to be about 150 to 400 years old. According to the Indian legend, Mishipeshu lives in the depth of large lakes. He can swim fast, and his back and tail are covered with scales. His enemy was the thunderbird. It's interesting, too, that they're only beginning to find fossils of dinosaurs with these, with these plates on the back, these dermal plates. It turns out that in most species, they were made of soft tissue and they weren't well preserved. So I think some of these ancient pictures we have of dinosaurs with these plates on their back are actually starting to be validated. Well, also along that same line, I'd like to take a look at dinosaur artifacts from around the world. Oops. This is a picture of Angkor Wat, meaning temple ruins from Cambodia. Now this temple was built by the Khmer people from about 900 to 1200 AD. The Khmers had a civilization of some 2 million people in the area. And this is a picture of a Hindu temple that was actually modeled after the constellation Draco, the dragon, dedicated in 1186 AD. Now what happened was about 1200 AD, the Vietnamese invaded, plus there was a plague of malaria, and so the civilization went into decline. The temple was overgrown by the jungle and lost for hundreds of years. Finally, in 1860, it was rediscovered. The interesting thing that they found there was it was covered with all these intricate carvings of various animals, but one in particular captures our attention. What does that look like to you? Yeah, Stegosaurus. So if these guys died out 65 million years ago, how did they know what he looked like? Well, the evolutionists have various theories for this. Two of the theories, I guess probably the only two, are, well, these things were so scary, so ferocious, that our ancestors millions of years ago, whatever they might have been 65 million years ago, were so scared by them that they imprinted the DNA that was transmitted generation after generation down to the present. And so that's how they knew what a Stegosaurus looked like. The other theory is, oh, well, they saw the bones and imagined how these things would look like if the bones were all put back together and the animal was alive. Oh, they had teams of paleontologists back then, huh? I don't think so. Well, here's another interesting set of artifacts that comes from a place called Acambaro, Mexico. This one here is a figurine that was dug up around the town of Acambaro. In 1945, an archaeologist started discovering these things. They found 33,000 of these figurines and excavated them over the years. Not all of them were dinosaurs, but a number of them were. Here's another example. Again, a dinosaur, a sauropod with dermal plates on its back, resembling what we now know as a Saltosaurus. Now, they went down and did a bunch of testing to see how old these things were on these figurines. And they came back with a date of no younger than 4,350 BC. So the question is then, again, how did these people know what these dinosaurs looked like in 4,350 years ago, not BC. I stand corrected on that. But anyway, how did they know what they looked like if they died off 65 million years ago? Along with the Saltosaurus, here's another one that they found. Again, the one that we are familiar with, the Stegosaurus. Another really interesting set of artifacts comes from Peru. These burial stones were first discovered in the city of Ica, Peru, by a Spanish priest in the year 1535. It's believed that they were carved by the Nazca people who lived there from about 400 to 700 AD. But the interesting thing is, look at what's carved on them. There was a Dr. Cabrera who made it his life work to collect these stones, these so-called Ica stones. He collected some 11,000 of them and put them in a museum in Lima, Peru. And they're still there today, if anybody wants to go see them. There are a few of them that have come to the United States. Now, they caused a controversy because skeptics say, oh, these things are fraudulent, because there was a guy down there who was trying to make some that looked like the ancient ones that they dug up by using a hacksaw blade. Well, it turns out that the ones that he was making were far inferior to the ones that were dug up from the graves, and it was easy to distinguish the fakes from the real ones because you could see bits of metal in the grooves from the hacksaw blades. So they seem to be genuine. On the left, some kind of a sauropod, apparently having a disagreement with some guy. And on the right, a Triceratops and perhaps a Psittacosaurus above that. Another interesting thing that comes from Italy, AD 100, approximately, called the Palestrina mosaic. This was made by an Italian artist, and it shows scenes along the Nile River stretching from Egypt to Ethiopia. Now, the interesting thing, though, is what we see. Oops. This isn't showing up very well. Just a minute. There. Up in the upper right-hand corner, which I have enlarged here, which looks like some kind of a reptile that they're hunting. It's unknown what this is. The Greek letters up there spell out Crocodilo pardalis, literally translated crocodile lizard. So what was a crocodile lizard? Well, we don't know, but here's a possible candidate called the Musaurus. This was believed to be up to about 10 feet long, fully grown, and the first one was discovered in Argentina in 1979. Another possible candidate, something called the Diadectus. I don't know for sure, but they remind me of them anyway. Well, once again, these kinds of artifacts come from civilizations all around the world. I've shown 33 different locations on this map, but they've come from just about every continent except Antarctica. I'd like to take a look at some unusual fossil finds of dinosaurs that have come to light in recent years. probably one of the ones that has generated the most publicity was the finding of fresh tissue inside a fossilized dinosaur bone. This is from a Tyrannosaurus rex that was discovered in, well, let's see, it was announced in 2005. Yeah, it was discovered in 2000, announced in 2005 by paleontologist Mary Schweitzer. In order to get the bone on a helicopter to get it out of the place where it was dug up, they had to break the bone. When they opened it up, there was fresh appearing tissue inside. In the upper left-hand corner was what they described as elastic tissue. And this one here is a cross-section of the bone after being air-dried, still with what they described as a fresh appearance. And this shows regions of the bone with fibrous structure still present. Well, 65 million years ago, well, because of the long ages paradigm that most paleontologists are committed to, they couldn't come to the obvious conclusion that this had to be much younger. When Dr. Schweitzer saw what appeared to be red blood cells, she said, quote, "It was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone, but of course I couldn't believe it. I said to the technician, 'The bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long?' How indeed. Could it be? Yeah, I think it's younger than that." Well, since this original discovery that was announced in 2005, a number of similar reports have come to light. So, how would it keep in your refrigerator? Here's an interesting one that was called, wait a minute, just a second here. I skipped ahead, okay. This one is a fossil skin impression from a dinosaur mummy called Dakota the Edmontosaurus. Now, when we speak of dinosaur mummies, we're not talking about the Egyptian type of mummies, but paleontologists call a mummy something that in which the entire animal, or at least most of it, was preserved. In other words, it was buried so quickly that the soft parts, the fleshy parts, were buried and turned to stone, or were preserved in stone. Well, these are examples of just exactly what we would expect to find if there was a worldwide flood. So anyway, this fossil mummy was found in what they call the Hell Creek Formation of North Dakota in 1999. They have been studying this thing ever since. The thing is so massive that they've tried to do X-ray studies of it, but they haven't been able to find a machine powerful enough to penetrate it. They haven't published any full pictures of it. This is the only one that I know of, but there is a book on it. Yeah, I was trying to think of the name of the book. The name of the book is called Grave Secrets of Dinosaurs. Well, here is a dinosaur called Leonardo, another dinosaur mummy. Actually, only 4 dinosaur mummies have been found. This was discovered in the year 2000 in the Judith River Formation in Montana. And so we think that Dakota looks something like Leonardo. Well, more recently, a really neat Edmontosaurus skin impression was found in Alberta, in a remote area west of Grand Prairie. It was announced in 2013. Discovered by a paleontologist by the name of Philip Bell. He was out one day in a dry riverbed and saw these bones sticking out, and when they excavated it, they found that it was an entire Edmontosaurus mummy. And he had some interesting things to say. But first, let me show you one other slide. This is a picture of an Edmontosaurus showing a head crest. This particular mummy that they found was so complete that they discovered for the first time that the Edmontosaurus had a head crest. So in older pictures of the Edmontosaurus, you won't see that, but this was buried so quickly and completely that it preserved the head crest. And not only that, actual skin was found in the skin impressions. Dr. Bell's colleague, Mauricio Barbie, was astonished as to how the fossil remained intact for around 70 million years. He says, there's something special about this fossil and the area where it was found, and I'm going to find out what it is. Dr. Bell goes on to say, obviously skin is something that decays rapidly, so the fossilization must have been incredibly fast. Yeah, I'll go along with that. Like, try a worldwide flood. Again, this is the kind of thing we might expect. Well, here's an interesting one. This is called Willow, the Thessaliosaurus. Willow was discovered in 1993, announced in the year 2000. The thing that made this special was when they did a CT scan, they saw not only the ribs and possible tendons and so forth, but this area here, which they thought was the heart. And they studied it and they claimed that it was a 4-chambered heart. Oh, dinosaurs have 4-chambered hearts. If true, then that implies that they would be warm-blooded like mammals. Of course, crocodiles have 4-chambered hearts too. But the thing was that after studying it for a while, other paleontologists disagreed. They said, no, that is not a heart. It's merely what they call an iron concretion, or otherwise known as ironstone. And I have an example of one here. I know you won't be able to see this very well in the back, but this is an iron concretion that I found in eastern Montana, much like the one that's shown as purportedly Willow's heart there. But anyway, Willow was supposed to be from the late Cretaceous. Let me back up a second. If it was a 4-chambered heart and it was warm-blooded, then this would lend credence to the theory that dinosaurs evolved into birds, but probably not. So anyway, Willow supposedly dated from 100 million years after birds supposedly evolved anyway. So here's another interesting thing that came out of China recently. Several years ago, somebody discovered a tiny dinosaur inside a mammal. Now, according to evolutionary theory, dinosaurs lived during the Mesozoic era, and that was followed by the Cenozoic, the so-called Age of Mammals. However, there are many places where mammals and dinosaur fossils are found together. But you don't see this in museums. You see the age of dinosaurs, and then you see the age of mammals. But here is proof that they lived together. The dinosaur that was eaten by this small mammal, is a little bit larger than a house cat, was a very young Psittacosaurus. Now, the fossils, according to evolutionary dating, are supposed to be 130 million years old, part of the Age of Reptiles, but there is a mammal as part of the Age of Reptiles. Here's one that was discovered fairly recently. This was discovered in 2004 by 3 amateur paleontologists when they discovered the skull of a previously unknown critter in the Hell Creek Formation, this time in central South Dakota. They donated it to the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. They named it Dracorex hogwartsia, meaning King Dragon of Hogwarts, from, guess what, Harry Potter. Well, some paleontologists think it may be from a young Pachycephalosaurus, so they made it with a skeleton from the Pachycephalosaurus and pictured it on the right here. But the thing that strikes me about it is the skull itself, how much it resembles the old stories of dragons. And even today, if you saw the Desolation of Smaug, the second part of the Hobbit trilogy, it looked a lot like Smaug. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a better picture of Smaug, but at least you can see some of the resemblance. Well, from the movie Jurassic Park, they told how they cloned a dinosaur. Would that be possible? Well, according to the movie, they found dinosaur DNA preserved in amber from a mosquito that had bitten a dinosaur. And even though the DNA was degraded, they were able to fill in the gaps with frog DNA, and presto, they had dinosaurs. Well, is that really possible? Well, recently, scientists discovered a mosquito that was buried between 2 layers of sedimentary rock that was well preserved, that still had animal blood in it. It was supposed to be 46 million years old, according to the dating of the rocks. But the question is, would that blood still be viable? Well, unfortunately, organic molecules are pretty unstable. They say that at the very outside, an organic molecule could only last up to 100,000 years at the very most, and DNA probably not more than 10,000 years, and even then, it'd be so degraded that it would be impossible to use, because you'd have to figure out what sequences were missing, what order they went into, how they fit together, and so forth. And so the short answer is no, it's not possible to clone a dinosaur. I'd like to see what the Bible has to say about dinosaurs, and looking at strange animals of the Old Testament. Some of you may be familiar with these passages, but let's take a look at them. Job chapter 40, verses 15 to 18, talks about an animal called behemoth or behemoth. It says, "Look at the behemoth which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, what power he has in the muscles of his belly. His tail swings like cedar. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like rods of iron." Now, what kind of an animal is this? Modern translations usually translate it hippopotamus, but us being from the Northwest, we know what a cedar tree looks like. I have yet to see a hippo with a tail that looks like a cedar. I was in Uganda a few years ago and saw lots of hippos, and their tails are little tiny things. Could it have been a Diplodocus, a Brachiosaurus maybe? We don't know for sure. How about chapter 41, talking about the animal called Leviathan? Leviathan's usually or traditionally a whale, but modern translations usually render it crocodile. Let's see how well that fits. 41:1, can you pull in the Leviathan with a fish hook or tie down his tongue with a rope? Jumping to verses 8 and 9, if you lay a hand on him, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. Any hope of subduing him is false. The mere sight of him is overpowering. Who dares open the doors of his mouth, ringed about with his fearsome teeth? His back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. Well, do we have any animals that fit this description? I present to you Super Croc. Now, Super Croc was first discovered in 1966, the latest discovery in 2001 in the nation of Niger in Africa. Super Croc was estimated to weigh 20,000 pounds, being up to 40 feet long. He had jaws 6 feet long, and 100 teeth, each an inch long. It had large scales on his back. These large scales here called scutes. These scutes were up to 4 feet long. They were impermeable armor plates that overlapped. In this painting here, Sarcosuchus imperator, that's the Latin name for it, battles a Suchomimus. Let's look at some more passages from Job 41:18 through 21. His snorting throws out flashes of light. His eyes are like the rays of dawn. Firebrands stream from his mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from his nostrils as from a boiling pot over a fire of reeds. His breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from his mouth. Oh, come on, a fire-breathing dragon in the Bible? Wow. What could this actually be? Well, once again, taking a look at Super Croc, there are some interesting features. On his snout, there's a large chamber. They don't know what it was for. They call it a bulla. Could it have been some kind of a chemical reaction chamber that actually spouted flame of some sort? There are chemical gases that spontaneously ignite when exposed to the air. Could this have been the case? The only living thing that we have that's close to this is called the bombardier beetle, which has chemical reaction chambers, a reaction chamber in his rear end, and spouts out hot boiling gases at his enemies. So it's at least theoretically possible. Well, let's go on. Could it be possible that some dinosaurs might still be around? I present for your consideration Mokele Mbembe from the Congo in Africa. Now, this sauropod-like creature is said to inhabit a place called the Likawala Swamp. Now, this swamp is 70,000 square miles of malaria-infested, mosquito-infested swampland that is almost inaccessible. So it's, well, several researchers have tried to go in and find this thing. but they haven't found anything except his footprints, the trail that he's left. But the natives describe him as a sauropod-like creature that they are afraid of. When shown a picture of a Diplodocus or Brachiosaurus, something like that, they say, oh, Mokelium bimbe. There are other reports that come from other remote corners of the world, such as Papua New Guinea, some possible sauropod sightings. There's a place called Ambungi Island. On the south side of the island, there have been reports of sauropod-like creatures sighted. The south side's unpopulated. And since the mid-1990s, some reports have been coming from there. This particular report cites a creature that was sighted in the water and then swam to a cave. It was described as having 4 legs, a small head, long neck and tail, dermal frills on its back and neck. It was estimated to be 12 feet long, 6 to 9 feet high, a dark brown in color. That wasn't the only report coming from that same area. In 1999, something like this was reported, reddish-brown sauropod-like animal with a dermal frill on its tail, estimated to be 9 feet long. It was seen eating plants. The only physical evidence it left behind was footprints. They also report that the people have seen theropods, that is the two-footed type dinosaurs. Well, the question for us is, well, what difference does it make if dinosaurs lived 65 million years ago or 6,500, or maybe they're even still around today? Well, it means that if they have been around for 65 million years, what happened? Why didn't they evolve? Everything else evolved over 65 million years, but these creatures apparently didn't. Or the date of 65 million years is incorrect. If the date is wrong, then there's something wrong with the standard geologic table. If the geologic table is wrong, then maybe evolution is wrong. If we don't have millions of years, then that doesn't leave time for evolution to proceed. So we think there's a good case for them still being around. So that's my talk for tonight. We're going to take some time for questions. Chris, did you want to say something first?
Yeah, thanks a bunch, Bruce. Everyone give Bruce a hand there. Okay, we got some time for questions. We're going to take up a quick offering, so if you're prepared to give today, you can prepare for that. And as soon as they come forward, let me do a prayer. And Bruce, we're not going to have much time for questions, though. I don't know if that's because I started late or you had a lot of material, but that's a lot of good material, huh? It's good. This is good. Okay, let me pray for our offering. Father, we thank you so much for Bruce again in his ministry and for the words that he brought this evening. And Father, we ask that you bless Cedar Park and ministries like this that are so willing to open up their doors and offer educational programs like this that would help us be better witnesses for you, Father. And we just ask that you bless the offering that's given this evening, Father, to further this ministry, to further this educational program, and so that many people will come to know the truth that comes about from your word, the truth that your Son came and died for us, the saving grace of Jesus Christ. Father, we thank you so much. Amen. Okay, so we are going to have to be brief with the questions because I do like to try to stick with our time and get you out of here promptly on our closing time. So we may have to limit it to just a couple, but if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic around. And but remember, you will be webcast, and so make your questions good. But there should be a couple. Raise your hand.
Hi. A few years ago, I was watching a show on television with Dr. Carl Baugh, and a paleontologist, and he was talking about the dinosaurs and humans living at the same time, and he was, I believe he had unearthed one dinosaur footprint with a human footprint inside of it. Do you know anything about that or something similar?
Yes, what you're referring to is the footprints found in the Paluxy River of Texas near Glen Rose. That's been a subject of controversy for a number of years, ever since the first footprints were discovered a number of years ago, I forget when. But there are a lot of footprints in this riverbed. Many dinosaur footprints and some that look like human prints. Well, for a long time, or for quite a while at least, creationists were saying, look, here's proof that dinosaurs and man coexisted. But after a while, they stopped using that argument because the tracks are degraded, the rock is fairly soft, they don't last that long once they've been exposed. So we can't absolutely prove that those are human tracks. Now, personally, I think they are. But since we can't prove that they are, we don't usually use that as an argument anymore.
Hi, the prevailing theory on the extinction from the evolutionist side, you know, the meteor that crashed, I think, somewhere off the coast of South Africa and caused the, as you mentioned, sort of the cloudy atmosphere and breathing dust, whatever that might have entailed. But that doesn't explain the fact that all these creatures are being found in sedimentary rock, as you also suggested, which, you know, the global flood. I mean, how can they say, to me, there's not a uniformitarianism explanation for these fossil remnants that we're finding, period.
Yeah, like Ken Ham likes to say, billions of dead things laid down by water in rock layers all over the earth. Today, it's very rare for a fossil to form. Usually it dies, then it's scavenged, and eventually even the bones are gone. And that's true for fish in the ocean too. Everything disappears except under very unusual circumstances, and that is it takes complete rapid burial. If that doesn't happen, then it's gone. And most of the bones that we find are disarticulated, as I mentioned, because apparently the decay had started to set in before burial occurred, except in a very few rare cases where they found these dinosaur mummies.
Do we have another? All right, awesome. You guys give Bruce a hand one more time. Did we? Oh, okay. Can't be sooner.
Do you think it's ironic to have found so many dinosaur fossils in the area of the United States? It just doesn't seem like the vegetation would have been in those region, or in that particular region of South Dakota, Alberta. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, if I understand your question, is why are the fossils found in such dry areas? Yeah, well, we have to remember that before the flood, conditions were entirely different. And there's plenty of evidence to show that the climate before the flood was more or less uniform worldwide and rather subtropical. This is perhaps one of the reasons that dinosaurs have died off, because not only have they been hunted to extinction by man, but the climate changed. There wasn't as much food supply. It's probably cooler, and they weren't able to adapt to it. But another reason that so many fossils are found in the Badlands in the West is because of lack of tree cover. So the paleontologists hike these dry ravines and riverbeds and look on the surface to see if they can see a bone sticking out, having been exposed by a rainstorm or something like that. There are probably more buried in the east and other places, but they're a lot harder to find in forested areas because the forests have grown up over them, and so it's much more difficult to find fossils under those conditions.